Welcome to our webinar, HHT and Iron, Boosting Your Health and Energy with Iron-Rich Foods. Again, my name is Courtney Castor-Irachi, and I serve as Patient Education and Registry Administrator here at the Foundation. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Kat Benson. Kat Benson is a licensed and registered dietitian nutritionist who helps clients escape the roller coaster dieting cycle and improve their relationship with food without cluttering rules or restrictions. She's a board-certified specialist in sports nutrition and specializes in working with PCOS and digestive health areas, and with those looking to deconstruct harmful dieting practices. She's passionate about promoting clarity on confusing nutrition information and bridging the gap of science and application for physical, mental, and social well-being. Kat spends time educating the public on the harms of dieting, diet products, and unethical nutrition-related companies and claims. Kat will now present on dietary iron and HHT, and then segue into a cooking demonstration. During the cooking demonstration, Kat will be answering some questions from the Q&A. Let's begin our program.
Hello, I am so excited to hop on here and talk to y'all about how we can really optimize from the nutrition standpoint our iron intake. Of course, being a registered dietitian, food is really important to me and something that I have a big passion for, right? That's why I decided to get into the field of studying nutrition. But at that same time, I also recognize that it's not exactly a cure-all. It's not, something magic or anything like that. So take all of this within the greater, overall, like nutrition is part of it, but it's not everything. But within nutrition, we can do what we can do to optimize our iron intake overall. And so that's what we'll be focusing on today. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can get started. I'll talk for about 10, 15 minutes or so, closer to 10, trying to get through the presentation so we can move on over to my kitchen and start the actual food preparation. All right, so if you're here, I'm sure that, there we go. I'm sure you're aware that, what iron is overall, but just to kind of give a baseline, it is a very important mineral. It's found in a variety of foods, from plant-based foods to animal-based foods. And so there's many different reasons why iron is important. It does a lot of different jobs in our body, of course, giving us energy. Sometimes when we're running low on energy, that could be an indication that our iron levels maybe aren't where they could be optimally, but it also does other things in our body, other support. It helps with brain development. That is very important for children to make sure they're getting enough iron. Delivery, it's part of our blood, right? And so delivery of oxygen and everything we need from our blood throughout the body, and for fighting off infections even. So it does play a lot of roles. And so when we start to have lower levels of iron, we can start to see maybe not so great symptoms or side effects of that. There's different kinds of iron when we're talking about intake-wise, food intake-wise. You may have heard of heme versus non-heme iron. Heme iron is generally the iron that's going to be, not generally, it is going to be found in animal products, animal sources, a variety of ones. It is going to be the more easily absorbed compared to the iron that we would find in plant-based foods, which would be non-heme irons. There's some non-heme iron in some animal food, but when you hear non-heme, we're going to mostly think about the plant-based foods. And there's a variety of those foods. Some of that non-heme iron can come in naturally, but there are also some foods that are fortified with iron. So non-heme iron is going to be still beneficial, still recommended, but it's not as easily absorbed in our body. And so there are ways that we can approach the non-heme iron to help increase some of that absorption and utilization of that iron. Now, when we're talking about deficiencies, you can be on the lower end and not actually be clinically deficient. That is still, and there's a range, of course, and when we're at the lower ranges, it can be helpful. Maybe not, it's not the time to maybe add a supplement necessarily, but just to kind of put a little bit more intention on iron-rich foods. And I do also want to make a note, and I'll mention this later too, but with supplementation, that is something that that's one of the supplements where if anybody has any questions about it, I encourage them to talk to their doctor if they need an iron supplement and what would be the best one for them. Because iron is not something that you just want to kind of add on as a supplement if you don't know where your levels are. So that's a really important note. But there are several signs that could indicate a deficiency going on. There are some that could be from a variety of different things, right? So you might see on there fatigue, that can be a sign of deficiency of iron, but it can also be a sign of a lot of other things going on as well. Maybe even not eating enough food or not getting enough sleep, right? So that is just, there are some signs of deficiency that kind of bleed into other maybe areas, but there are ones like the desire to eat non-food items. That is one that, I work with sometimes prenatal nutrition or prenatal clients, and I have had cases where they're craving some non-food items. Ice, dirt, clay is also another non-food item that could indicate some cravings to eat that deficiency level. So just things to kind of keep in mind if you're seeing several of these and maybe haven't checked blood iron levels. Now, everybody needs iron, right? It's part of just general recommendations for all humans, but there are some groups of people that can maybe need a little bit more support in their iron intake. And you might find yourself or one of your family members within several of these groups. And if you find yourself in multiple of these groups, let's say in addition to HHT, maybe they're an adolescent going through growth spurts, or maybe they're also an athlete participating in long distance training, right? Those are going to be additional kind of categories to just kind of maybe that might indicate that need or plan of action to implement maybe more iron-rich foods intake-wise. Now with iron, we talked a little bit about this at the beginning, the differences between heme iron versus non-heme iron. And when we're having those non-heme irons, there are some recommendations, and those would be things that encourage the absorption, utilization of the iron. So vitamin C, that's one of the ones that typically, if you're gonna, hear or read a handout about iron, it's gonna recommend to pair that together with some vitamin C. So whether that's coming from a citrus fruit or other kind of fruits or vegetables, that is a great option. I often get some surprise that potatoes are a great option of vitamin C, or broccoli too. So it doesn't just have to be those citrus type foods, but that is a way to help with the absorption. But fermented foods also can be beneficial, and heme iron as well. So the mixture or pairing together of that animal-based protein and also some non-heme iron based foods that can help with the absorption. On the flip side, there are some inhibitors, some compounds that make it a little bit more challenging for our bodies to absorb the non-heme iron. And those would just be things that are just, naturally occurring in some foods, like phytates and polyphenols, tannins you might hear about in like tea or colas, for example, calcium as well. Now these, one of the main areas of practice that I focus in is having a healthy relationship with food. And this is like one application of it. Just because a food has any one of these compounds doesn't mean we have to eliminate them, right? So they're through the cooking process a lot of times, and through adding some vitamin C, for example, that can overcome those iron inhibitors. So no need to really worry about these foods. If you do have, very, specific questions or concerns about it, that is definitely something that you can bring up with your doctor or registered dietitian. But overall, generally speaking, there's no need to really be fearful or, try to remove these kind of foods, because those foods can offer a lot of other micronutrients and other benefits that are important for overall health outside of iron needs. All right. So one of my favorite kind of tips or hacks, whatever you want to call it, is utilizing the working around our hepcidin. So that is a hormone that is produced in our bodies that regulates iron absorption and our storage. And so if we can kind of time some iron intake, whether that is from a food source or a supplement, of course, depending on what your doctor is recommending, that can be helpful to know that taking it earlier in the day when that hormone is lowest, that can be helpful for the absorption of the iron. So here are some general recommendations regarding that, and just to kind of help with getting the most bang for your buck with those foods. So an example that sometimes people will do is utilize some of the fortified breakfast cereals, right, with breakfast and having that earlier in the day. And this is not to say that it's not helpful or it's not recommended to have iron-rich foods at dinner or 3 to 6 hours after exercising, right? Like that is still going to be beneficial. It's still going to provide your body with the energy that you need and protein and carbohydrates and fats too. So, but this is just something to kind of keep in mind, a way to optimize some of that iron intake and absorption. All right, so touching a little bit on bleeding triggers, there is a lot of, I think, focus in research specifically for foods with that. But generally, like I encourage people to keep a food diary to see if there's any connections between what they're eating and any changes in their bleeding. And also recognizing that sometimes within those kind of food diaries, moisture, the environment, physical activity, like different things that you're doing can play a role in that. So when we have a food diary and you're kind of seeing the connections, it's important to kind of look overall and see, more environmental connections that might be there and might be missed. High blood pressure is something that might also affect nosebleeds. And so for that in particular, bleeding triggers related to that, we might just have implementation of just general medical nutrition therapy related to high blood pressure, for example. But in general, being a food first kind of dietitian, I like to recommend and encourage people to focus first on the food rather than adding a whole bunch of herbal supplements or anything like that that can maybe interact with other medications in general. So, and a lot of supplements they're not going to have that same level of regulation even. So moving from there, I have a couple of tips and recommendations for blood testing. If none of these are followed, that is okay. It's still important to get your blood tested. But if you can, make sure you're getting a little bit of hydration, adequate hydration. That's going to be beneficial just for a variety of blood testing labs, as far as labs go, and to avoid really damaging muscle exercise. I did a really intense exercise, like lifting wise this past weekend, and I was super sore. The next couple days had delayed muscle onset soreness. And so just as an example, like that wouldn't be necessarily the best time to go ahead and get some lab testing done. If you're feeling a little bit under the weather, waiting a little bit longer to get that lab testing done. And then if you're having a menstrual cycle, trying to test around the similar time of the month. If you have to like push that out a little bit, might be more beneficial to get that testing if you need it done. But if you have a little more wiggle room, trying to get that on around the same time cycle wise. There are a couple of tips when we're talking about optimizing iron intake. So as we kind of talked about, choosing foods that contain iron and pairing them together with some kind of vitamin C. And an example of that would be adding things like beans or lentils to meals, whether you're adding that to soups or like a casserole kind of dish or on the side, or even with a salad, sprinkling that with nuts or seeds, or even beans and lentils, or both. That's an option as well. And then snacking on some iron fortified cereals. An example might be Cheerios, even to pair that together with some nuts and seeds, make like your own kind of trail mix as an example, and having some strawberries on the side or orange on the side to help with the absorption. Another option or idea is to prepare some food in a cast iron skillet or cookware. And this is not something that I would ever say, like, we don't want to rely on that, but it can just be a good way of adding some additional iron, or using those little iron, lucky fish ones to kind of throw in when you're making rice, for example. Same kind of idea as using the cast iron skillet or cookware. And then if you are consuming coffee or tea or anything with those tannins, having them between meals might be helpful, a good idea, rather than with meals, to help with that absorption as well. So I have a list of high iron foods and some high vitamin C foods. Sometimes people are surprised to see broccoli and dark greens on there, or cabbage, but those are great options. And then I don't know if anybody wants to take a screenshot or whatever. I'll leave this up for probably about 5 more seconds. Lots of variety there. And then this one, I'll leave up for a few seconds as well. Some great examples of some non-heme iron and the amounts on there that can kind of help you with choices and getting variety, because these are not just important for the iron, right? Like, that's our focus for today, but they have so many other micronutrients in there that's going to be beneficial for overall health. And so sometimes I think that in nutrition, it's really easy to super focus on one thing and miss the forest for the trees, for example. So having variety is a good thing, beneficial, can also keep things a little bit more exciting too, food intake wise. So we have non-heme iron examples and some heme iron examples. All right, so went through that pretty quickly. Let's go ahead and get to cooking. I'm going to move over and turn the presentation back over to Courtney.
All right, everyone. So while Kat is transitioning to her kitchen camera, I'm going to go ahead and put a poll out there. Has anyone seen a dietitian? I know that a lot of HHT patients know that certain foods are bleeding triggers for them, or they are interested in looking to up their iron in their diet. Has anyone seen a registered dietitian?
I'm excited to hear if anyone has seen a registered dietitian. All right, so I can't see the answers or anything, but Courtney, I don't know if you were going to feed them over or if you just want me to go ahead and start.
Sure, I'm looking at them right now. A lot of people are saying no, but they would like to go. And a few people have said yes, and they would like to go again.
Okay, awesome. So dietitians are a very cool kind of healthcare provider. So if you have any questions or concerns, like talking to your doctor, your primary care doctor, sometimes they can give you a referral. A lot of them are already working with dietitians, whether it's in a clinic or private practice. And so if you get a referral from your doctor, sometimes that can be, depending on everything else that's going on, that can be, and the insurance, of course, that can be covered. Or maybe the dietitian can provide a super bill where you can send that over to insurance and then get that reimbursed. So there's a variety of options, and I think availability for dietitians, especially now that a lot of them are practicing virtually too. So one of the silver linings or benefits of the past couple of years is there are more dietitians to see and meet with people virtually, access wise. All right, so today we are going to be doing 2 recipes if we can get through them. I have a couple of things already kind of set up, ready to go. We're going to do a bowl overall, a mixture of a lot of different foods that provide iron. And overall, so that I was mentioning before, that it contains around 8 milligrams of iron. Now, this is going to be, of course, dependent on it's not like exactly, so it's going to be around there, and we're not going to be able to maybe absorb all of it, but what we can do is pair that together again with some kind of vitamin C to help with that absorption overall. So you're going to see how we're doing that today. So we have some rice that we're going to pair together with some asparagus, some edamame, some chickpeas, and then we're going to make a sauce that goes over it and has some vitamin C in there to help with the flavor and also absorption. And we're going to cook that in a cast iron skillet. So first thing that I'm going to start with is some rice. So I can't really see it on the screen, but I just have some basmati rice. And the preparation instructions for this one, it was just to rinse it before cooking. So I did that right before. And then I have a cup of it in here, or half a cup of it in here. And so I'm just going to put a full cup of water into the little pot. And then once that boils, I'm going to put the rice in there. So I'm going to fill this up. And Courtney, if you have a question, if you want to read that out while I fill this up.
I'm looking at the chat right now. So, James, Teresi asks, what is the difference in benefits of having a high iron diet versus taking iron supplements?
Okay. So I love this question because food is more than just the individual micronutrients, right? And so the benefits of a lot of the foods that are rich in iron is that like on the plant-based side, you're going to get a lot of fiber, you're going to get a lot of other micronutrients that are important. And same thing goes for the animal-based proteins as well. So B vitamins, those are important. And so like if you are deficient in iron, it's going to be helpful to have, maybe depending on what your levels are and what your doctor says, can be helpful to focus in on both areas. So what are the benefits that I see more in the supplementation side of things, though, is that you know exactly, how much you're taking and the kind, especially if it's like a iron bisglycinate, you're going to absorb maybe more than what you would with food. So there's benefits to both. And I didn't mention what I was doing. So I have, and this is a little bit lower, but I had asparagus. And so I just chopped them up. I had a handful. There was about 10 to 12 stalks. So what I'm going to do now is pour just some olive oil or avocado oil. You could do either or. I like cooking for higher temperatures avocado oil, but I'm just going to pour a little bit of that into this cast iron skillet and let that heat up a little bit, depending on how much time I have for cooking and how much patience I have. Sometimes I'll just add food in there. I know you're supposed to add it in and kind of wait a little bit before you add food in, like heat it up before, but just depends on what I'm doing. So it's heating up. I'm just going to go ahead and add some of the asparagus in there. I think that kind of, with that question, that kind of answered. So there are benefits of both.
That was a perfect answer. Great. We also have another question from Lisa Steele. She says, how much does menopause affect iron absorption due to the lower estrogen and liver function? Also, does body weight affect iron absorption?
That is a really good question. So I have to be honest, and I can go and look at research regarding that. That is one that I'm kind of stumped on with the menopause regarding that. And then as far as body weight, I mean, as long as you're getting in that variety, and we're still, the recommendations are when we're talking about what we can do nutrition wise to increase intake, there's still going to be the same recommendations. And even within body weight, depending on, you know, body composition and wise and overall, I think energy, or not energy, but just health wise, what, you know, variety of intake is. I mean, that can be very individual, but there shouldn't be much of a significant change as far as recommendations go. So the next thing that I have is edamame. You can buy edamame. Typically that's going to be frozen, but it's going to be either in the shell or unshelled. I actually could not find them unshelled. They were all with the shell, with the pod. It's a better word for it. And so I just froze it and individually took them out of the pods. I think the pods are really helpful when you're trying to just have a snack to just kind of eat from, but doing a cooking presentation, not the best idea. So I went ahead and de-potted them. And so this is just edamame that you would find in the frozen section. And so that is ready to go on the side. And I'm going to go ahead and stir the asparagus a little bit. And while I do that, the water is ready for the rice. Any other questions coming in?
Thanks for answering that question, Kat. And I want to let the chat know that any questions that we don't get to today, I will be saving them and making sure that we get those answered to you in your email at later this week, if that helps anyone, because I know that everyone has so many questions.
They're good questions coming in. So right now I'm going to go ahead and just open up this can of garbanzo beans. You can call them chickpeas, same thing. Let's see if there's any other questions that are coming in.
Lisa also asks, if you have an iron-rich soup, is it better to use non-whole grain pasta or whole grain pasta?
If you're getting in vitamin C in there, I would recommend the whole grain overall for nutrient wise, and including the iron wise. I was reading some studies on, it was talking about the difference between the like tannins and phytates and how much of an increase that once you add those in, it just really helps with the absorption. So I would still encourage the whole grain. So what I'm going to do is just strain these garbanzo beans or chickpeas and do a quick rinse of them. Okay. All right. So I don't know if you can hear that. The asparagus. Let's see.
I can't, but it looks really good. Nancy Garcia also has a question. Is garlic considered a blood thinner?
Garlic considered a blood thinner. So when you're eating it in its, like if you're adding garlic to a meal, to a sauce like we're going to be doing, not a concern. The only concern is when you start to like have, and some people will just in the kind of supplement world, take capsules of things like garlic or turmeric, just really concentrated forms of anything, cinnamon, for example, too. And so what I always recommend is just getting it as flavoring and like incorporated it into meals, and you're good with that. Anything in excess, that's when I do start to have some concerns and some, we can kind of, the side effects can be a little bit not so great. That was a great question. Whoop.
I also have another question from Karen. She says she's a heavy black tea drinker. I know you addressed this in your presentation, but she wants to know if it affects iron absorption. She's also a vegetarian. Do you think she wants to know if she can continue her tea habit.
Yes. So if that's something that you really enjoy, yes, I would just time it between your meals. So for in the morning, if you wake up with some black tea or something, like try to maybe have that separate from breakfast if breakfast is something that you do have. So I don't want to take that away from you. But yeah, just playing around it. That's fine. All right, so I'm going to start on the sauce. So the sauce, let me grab, let's see. Okay, so the sauce is going to be a mixture of some ginger, garlic, some low sodium soy sauce. If you wanted to use something like coconut aminos, you could do that as well. Some sriracha, a little bit of honey for some sweetness, and also some rice vinegar. And you will get the recipe for this, but it's just going to be a fourth teaspoon of ginger, half teaspoon of garlic, a teaspoon of sriracha, and then 1 tablespoon of everything else. So I'm going to start with the garlic, not with the garlic, with the ginger. So I have fresh ginger here. What I like to do is, I think it tastes better than the already minced kind, but if you want to do that, that saves time, that's fine. I do have the already pre-minced garlic that I always use. So just kind of pick and choose, but I just kind of will cut until I can see the inside. So you can see the inside, you can see the outside. So I just cut, kind of peel it almost. And then once you get that peeled enough, then you just take something to just kind of grate it a little bit. And then we're only going to do, let me cut this part off a little bit, that 1/4 of a teaspoon. So very little amount. We don't need much. I'm just going to grate that here. Any other questions pop up?
So a lot of people are asking about salicylates
Mhm.
and like other bleeding triggers and what maybe they can avoid, or how that they can avoid getting severe nosebleeds and
Mhm.
how to construct their diet around that.
Yeah. The salicylates, that is a very, say, controversial one. So I just put all the garlic, or not the garlic, the ginger in here. The concern is more so of just like the compound and being kind of confused for something like aspirin. But when we're talking about actual food, doesn't seem to necessarily the research support that big of an effect. So do you want to be eating that exact same food, in large quantities all day, every day? No, for a variety of reasons. But that doesn't mean that you have to refrain from those foods overall. I would still just kind of approach that in that moderation, just like anything else. All right, so we added the garlic, and then, ginger. I keep saying garlic. We're going to add the ginger and then get half a teaspoon of garlic. So I'm just going to squeeze that out. If it's a little more, that's okay. I'm a big fan. All right. And then we're going to add 1 teaspoon of sriracha. Depending on how intense heat-wise you like your food, you can add more, you can add less. Let's see. This is a half teaspoon, so I'm going to do it twice. Oh, and I didn't mention this recipe is for about 2 servings. Okay, so this is great to make and then have for lunch the next day, or to make even double it and have lunch for the week. After the sriracha, I'm going to go ahead and we're moving into the 1 tablespoon, and I'm going to grab the avocado oil. I like to do avocado oil. We're going to do the honey right after this. I like to add any kind of either olive oil or avocado oil before honey for recipes, because the oil coats it And so the honey is easy to just kind of pour out from there. Any other questions? And let me actually show y'all. So all the honey's out now. Isn't that awesome? Just from adding the oil in first. All right, I'm going to put in the rice vinegar now. Ooh.
That sauce looks amazing. I love using honey and ginger too in sauces.
Right.
We do have another question that was submitted when they registered. Someone asked that they're not a big meat eater. What other foods should they focus on to get a high iron diet?
Yeah. So any of the like legumes, beans, chickpeas that we're doing in here, asparagus, nuts and seeds, fortified grains, cereals, those are all really good choices. And you just want to pair them with some kind of vitamin C. And so that's why I really love this recipe, because it is a plant-based one, right? There's no meat in it. So a good example is this meal. So I just put it in a little mason jar. I'm just going to mix it up a little bit and just kind of let it set aside. The basmati rice says it would be ready in 15 minutes. And I put that in about 10 minutes ago. So that should be, it's almost ready. It needs a little bit more. I'm going to stir the asparagus a little bit more. And then, let's see. Oh, let me grab the chickpeas. So the chickpeas were just sitting in the sink. So I just poured them out of the can, rinsed them a little bit, let them kind of drain out. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and add the edamame to the asparagus. And then I'm going to add the chickpeas to that. Just kind of let them mix a little bit. Let that sit for a little bit while we wait a few more minutes on the rice. Any other questions come up?
Yes. Someone else asked a question about hot sauces and like hot foods. Does that trigger bleeding? I know we've also had another question come in when someone registered, talking about what possible spices are also maybe bleeding triggers as well.
Yeah, they can't. So the main concern whenever I hear like spicy food and bleeding, being a digestive health focused dietitian, the first thing I think of is any kind of like gastritis or bleeding going on in your digestive system. And so that is definitely, if you do have any like digestive symptom wise like that, which you would hopefully know based on your doctor, then that would definitely be medical nutrition therapy wise something to be concerned about. But other than that, I mean, if again within moderation, that's fine. Let me see. Let me go ahead and stir this. And I know we kind of talked about this in the presentation, but being a dietitian, I got into nutrition originally because I grew up as an athlete. And then when I was an older teenager and in my early 20s, I started to have a lot of, just food fears, food concerns, and I just wanted, the perfect diet. And as I learned more about nutrition and, application of it, the more and more it got, as far as like complication wise, it was kind of, yes, there is a lot nutrition information wise for like medical nutrition therapy and application, but we know a lot about nutrition and just the variety and moderation. Like sometimes we can just focus so much and miss what we said in the presentation, the forest for the trees, and put too much kind of, fear around some of that food. And so one of my favorite things as a dietitian, I'm just going to add the rice in. One of my favorite things as a dietitian is just to kind of help ease that and encourage people to have that variety of intake and see how we can, keep notice of their lab values and make adjustments from there on the individual case by case level, but really show them how they can have that variety. And we can see that with their lab values. And that's one of the most, I think, coolest parts about being a dietitian, and freeing parts on the client side. So all of those are added together: the rice, the asparagus, the chickpeas or garbanzo beans, and the edamame. And so I have this sauce in here. I'm just going to mix it up a little bit more, and then I'll open it, just kind of pour that in, let that heat up a little bit more. And that's it for this one. Well, I take that back. I do like to top it with an avocado, 1/4 to half an avocado. And I also take that back for the sauce because I missed one of the most important ingredients, which is the lemon. So I'm just going to cut that. And it's half a lemon just squeezed in there. So I'm just going to squeeze it over it. You can add it in with the sauce, or you could add it in after. It still ends up in the same place. That's fine. So this vitamin C is going to help with some of that absorption. And then once we put it in a bowl and top it with some avocado, that's also going to help as well. There's vitamin C in that too. All right, so that is looking good. Let's go ahead and turn that off. Any other questions come in?
So we have about 10 minutes left. That dish looks fantastic. Would you say that you can adapt that recipe that you provided for everyone and turn it into a bunch of different things based on, what foods are in a high iron diet?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you could even add any kind of animal protein to this, make it, a little bit more, but yeah, this is what it looks like. There's going to be a good amount of protein in here as well with the edamame, and the chickpeas. So this is a really great meal for someone who is wanting to increase their iron intake a little bit more, and someone who is a vegetarian. So that looks delicious. And I love the balance of carbohydrates to protein, and the carbohydrates in there, especially like the edamame and the asparagus and the chickpeas, you're going to get fiber in there as well.
Now, do you have to use basmati rice? Can you use a different type of rice or a different type of carb in there? David was asking in the chat.
Yeah, you can use another one. I personally just like the flavor of it more. And just an enriched one that's going to be helpful. So I just cut that avocado. Let's see. I'm going to just kind of slice it. And add some in. You said we have about 10 minutes left?
Yes, about 10 minutes.
All
Do
right.
you think that's enough time to get through our second recipe for breakfast tomorrow?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Great,
So
great.
there's a final. All right. So with this one's going to be easier. We're going to make a overnight oats recipe. So I just have oatmeal over here. I have any kind of nut butter, almond butter, peanut butter, cashew butter that you want. I have a toasted coconut one. It doesn't really taste like coconut. It tastes like actual coconut in there. It's not like a coconut flavored one, because there's actual coconuts in there. Oh, also another thing, if you wanted to add some cashews to the meal that we just did, that's a good little like crunch to it as well. And again, we're adding nuts and seeds, so you're going to be adding a little bit more iron too. I have so many ingredients out here, and so I missed that before. But all right, so we have the oatmeal, we have the nut butter, we have some shredded coconut here. So just some shredded coconut, it's kind of hard to see. And then I also have some pumpkin seeds here. So I hope you've seen this kind of trend overall that we're using nuts and seeds, and just kind of pairing them together with some vitamin C foods. Have some almond milk right here. And then for our vitamin C boost, have some strawberries. Now you can use fresh strawberries, you can use frozen strawberries. Sometimes I get the question of whether frozen fruit is beneficial if it's healthy. And the answer is yes, it is very, very beneficial, still very healthy. It is flash frozen while it's at its peak. And so what that means is that it's quickly frozen. And that is very helpful because it can help with some of those nutrients staying there. So rather than having the fruits and vegetables travel long distances and maybe getting a little bit older and having those compounds break down. But either way, fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, frozen, they're all good. So I just added 1/4 of a cup. You can do 1/4 of a cup to 1 cup. Just kind of depends on if you want to add, what you want to add to your breakfast overall. But generally I'll get about 1/2 cup of raw oatmeal. And then you just want to add, you don't have to measure everything out for overnight oats, but generally ish around 1 tablespoon. So this is 1/2 tablespoon. I'm going to put 1 full tablespoon of the coconut in there. And then I'm going to add in, I have 1 tablespoon of pumpkin seeds, and I'm also going to add in there. And then, let's see. So those pumpkin seeds, I would have had them in a little container, but the only ones that my husband could find were salted. And I didn't exactly want all of the salt in my more sweet oatmeal. And so I did rinse that out. And I've done that before, and that works really well to kind of get the outside salt layer off. There is still a little bit of a salty taste, but I find that with the sweetness of the fruit, that kind of is actually a really good blend. So I'm going to add some nut butter now to this, just with a spoon. Get about a spoonful. Add that there. And then depending on when you're going to have this, I sometimes put overnight oats, and let me put the strawberries in there. I sometimes just close it like this, and I'll make several of them at one time and put them in the freezer. And then the night before that I want it, I'll just pull it out, put some almond milk in there, and then just have it the next day. But if you like with the old-fashioned oats, sometimes it's a little bit better to do it overnight, but with the quick oats, sometimes I do it just 20 minutes before I add the almond milk, and it's fine. So if you want to make a whole bunch and put it in the freezer, I would just do it like this and then put the lid on it, put it in the freezer, and then the night before or the morning of, depending on if it's the old-fashioned one or a quick cook one, then put the almond milk in after.
Wow, that is gonna make breakfast so much easier. Just for me personally, I always forget.
Okay. Oh, I did want to add too, generally you're gonna double to depending on how much you like water in your oatmeal. I don't like to have it super watery, and so I put about what I did, like 1.5 the amount. So if I did 1 cup or like 1/2 cup, I'll do 3/4 of a cup of the liquid. All right. That was my note. And then that's it. You just kind of shake it up. You can leave it there to soak up, for the oats to soak up the fluid. And then you can eat it from the jar or pour it into a container or into a bowl and eat it from there.
Great. That's great. Kat, do you want to head over to your other laptop and we can answer a few last minute questions from our audience?
Absolutely.
Great. Yeah. I just want to thank everyone for being on here tonight really quick. We are so glad that we can have Kat and have Cure HHT sponsor this webinar and this cooking demonstration. Lynn had one question on vitamin K. She wanted to know that is a possible bleeding trigger and any insight you can provide around that.
Yes. So vitamin K really comes up in medical nutrition therapy when we're talking about being on blood thinners like Coumadin or warfarin, for example. But what we have found is that as long as your consistency is there, whether it is higher or lower, that is the most important thing. The issues come when you have, large variances in your intake, whether from supplementation. And so like, for example, if somebody was on that medication, that blood thinner, we would encourage them to just maintain what their current level of intake is and not all of a sudden go on a kale kick, for example.
Yeah, we also have another question. Kate wants to know, what are the key points to discuss with a dietitian that relate to HHT? You have a lot of background in PCOS and other digestion issues, and we really value your insight.
Yeah. So are you asking like what to make sure that they're kind of aware of, or can you repeat the question?
Yeah. So like, what are the key points to discuss with a dietitian that relate to HHT? So
Gotcha. Okay.
eating triggers, a lot of the time, that's mainly what our community talks about. And then also obviously a high iron diet. That's why we're having this webinar.
Yes. Just making sure that they know what that is and some of the concerns around instead of just having an iron based intake or making sure that you're getting enough of the iron, making sure that they recognize how often you are bleeding. So if it's just, a nosebleed, here and there, that's going to be different whether compared to if it's every day, and how long it is going on and how severe it is essentially. And so just that's going to play a role in the recommendations for iron intake. That would be the big one that I would say.
Thank you.
And then if you're talking to a dietitian, they are going to know the iron enhancers and the iron inhibitors, for example. So that is something that they're going to be trained in, and also looking for signs of deficiency.
And then let me look and see if I can find. I'm looking. I'm not sure how much insight you have on this, but Lori asks, how many hours should you space out like an iron supplement versus another vitamin supplement like calcium?
Yeah, so 3 to 5 hours, if you can, or if you can spread it out a little bit further, that's not going to be harmful. But if you are trying to spread it out as minimum as possible, I'd say 3 to 5 hours.
Right. Yeah. I also want to tell the audience, I know how many questions are in the Q&A. I will be downloading those questions and making sure that we get each and every one of you an answer from tonight, whether I get those answers from Kat or from our scientific experts. On behalf of everyone at Cure HHT, I just want to thank everyone for attending tonight's webinar and staying connected with us. We hope you really enjoyed tonight's programming, and I really want to thank Kat today for her time. I'm really glad that we got to have this webinar and offer this to the HHT community. And as a reminder, this program is recorded and it will be posted to the website, and we really truly appreciate everyone's participation. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great evening.